Good afternoon, everybody. We have a special guest today when we can find her. Martesha Johnson, the public defender, is going to be on because we had the district attorney last time who answered some questions from all of you. General Funk is back on the call today. I see Amanda Brock is on the call. Thanks, Amanda, for being on. We've got Councilmember Sepulveda on. Checking to see who else we've got on. Most likely going to be a smaller group of people because of the holiday tomorrow. So it appears that a bunch of people decided to just take off, and that's fine. But anyway, while we're waiting for the public defender to get here, one of the things that we were supposed to be, what you all were supposed to be doing was talking through or looking through the notes that we had sent and the references and all the information that we had accumulated to see if there was anything in particular that you wanted to start talking about, maybe not at this meeting, but at the next meeting, or if there's still things that are missing in terms of the information that you're looking for. Anybody had a chance to take a look at that? I know it's been a busy couple of weeks. Or any comments regarding any of the information that was coming in? You can unmute if you want. Anything that you knew specifically that we are missing. And I know that we're going to talk about it, but just checking while we're waiting for the public defender. Anything at all? Okay, Jennifer.
I haven't had a moment. I was just going to speak up and say I haven't had any time. But
okay. Has your cat had a chance to look at the paperwork?
So she did not go on vacation last week, and so one would think that she would have had lots of time, but she's lazy. She did not. You know.
She's now looking at me with an odd look. Now she turned away. So anyway, most cats do that to me.
But I promise to have stuff for next time.
Okay. Anybody else had a chance to look at it? It's okay. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying when you get a chance, some of it was coming in pieces. We're going to try to get it back together in some type of comprehensive form and take a look at it. I'm interested in looking at some of the specific data that's going of people who are going in. I know there's a lot of information coming from the behavioral health facility about how many people were actually, going through treatment and so forth. I just got a note, I think, from Emily. Is that it, Emily? Yeah. So she's wrapping up another meeting. It should be here in just a few minutes. Okay.
Yes.
General Funk, say it again, Emily.
I was saying yes, Vice Mayor. My name's Emily. I'm the Deputy Public Defender. So just wanted to give you a little update. All
right. Do you know my brother, Bill?
Actually, I get calls for him sometimes, and I met him once. And I told him that. He thought it was hilarious. So whenever I get a chance, I pass a voicemail over to him.
Okay. So my brother, just for purposes of explaining who my brother is, my brother Bill was the public defender in Davidson County. A long time ago. I think he was maybe in 1996. It was maybe 96 to 2000. That was his reign of terror.
Right
I don't know. General Funk, I think you knew him back then. Is that right?
I did. I think it was a little bit earlier than that because he was already public defender when I was a district attorney from 86 to 89. So he was already, he succeeded Jim Weatherly, whose term ended maybe 88. So then he became public defender.
Okay, I can't remember that back that far. I can barely remember the last week, but yes, my brother was the public defender and served one term. And I actually spent some time with, well, not with him. I wouldn't want to learn from him, but I did spend some time down at the jail docket at the old jail. It was very, very interesting how that whole process worked. All right. Let me see. We're still waiting for the public defender. Anything else specifically while we're waiting that you all want to talk about today?
Vice Mayor, I don't know if we want to wait until Martesha gets on here, but she and I have been communicating about finding times to shadow Kyle over at the BCC and to actually tour the BCC. So she gave a couple of options for us, what we could do as a group, and then we can coordinate that and figure out how we want to do it.
Okay. What's the best way, Keeda, do you want to send emails out to everybody?
Yeah, so I guess we'll wait for her to get on here and we'll talk about it and go over the options, and then everybody can email me which option they want, and then I'll coordinate with Kyle, to get a tour set up and or to shadow him on his docket.
Okay. Kyle, so you work with the DA's office on the behavioral health part, is that right?
I'm the assistant public defender assigned to the behavioral care center. So I work with Ms. Hoffman, who I think you all heard from last time, and we do the staffing piece every morning to be able to figure out who would be eligible and for me to talk to those clients to see whether they are interested in participating.
Okay. Hey, Kyle, would you, while we're waiting again for Ms. Johnson to come on, can you give us kind of an update from your perspective, kind of about how this works? I know Ms. Hudson did it last week or 2 weeks ago from the DA's office.
Sure, yeah. So every morning, usually starting around 6:30 or so in the morning, we start sending a lot of emails and text messages because the behavioral care center staff will send out a list of folks that have been arrested in the overnight hours that have been screened as potentially eligible from a mental health perspective, regardless of what they're charged with. Originally, the felonies were not included on that list. Some of those felonies are being included on that list now. And I think Jordan and General Funk talked about that at the previous meeting, so I won't go into all of that. But at that point, then Jordan and I kind of review each case. Some of that happens before we actually get to the staffing because it involves me pulling documents and paperwork, warrants and that sort of thing for her to be able to take a look at. And then once we have that staffing, then anybody that is considered to be an eligible candidate, I speak to them. Now we try to get that done early enough in the morning that folks have not made their way over to the courthouse yet. Oftentimes they're still in booking or have maybe recently been moved to one of the other pods right there downtown. And the purpose of that is to try to avoid the transport of folks into the court system so that they can have an experience that is separate from the regular kind of jail review and that sort of thing. And most of the time, I think I'm pretty successful at getting those done. Occasionally, the jail staff has already moved somebody to get them ready to go to court. And so I have to go over to the courthouse to meet somebody. But for instance, this morning I met with a gentleman. He agreed to participate in the program. And we prevented his movement to the courthouse so that he could participate starting early this morning rather than having to go to court and come back and all of that sort of thing. So that conversation, is obviously the same way that I would do it with any other client that has been appointed to our office, but it includes the extra wrinkle of explaining what the behavioral care center is to them, how it functions, and how it ultimately could lead to a resolution of their case. And then, they have the option of saying yes or no. And some of them say, some folks say, I'm not interested. Some folks say I would like to bond out, or some folks just say, I'd like to go over to the courthouse and see the judge. So I think there's a variety, and the DCSO has kept some statistics on some of that. I'm not sure how much of that has been provided to the group already. But I think, a large number of the folks that we don't kind of get right off the bat are folks that are bonding out or are just declining to participate.
And Kyle, we had talked a little bit about, we had talked about that the meeting ago, 2 weeks ago. How hard is it to get to get people to get into the program? I mean, I know they've got different options and they're looking at different things, and mostly they want to just probably get out. But how hard is it to get people convinced that this is a good thing?
It is it's a mixed bag, to be honest. Some folks, I think with the program being so new and with it being tailored to an individual in a way that, if they ask me, how long am I going to be here? I can't provide that date. I can't say you're going to be here 3 days, you're going to be here 2 days, you're going to be here 7 days. And so because of that, I think that level of uncertainty leads to some folks saying, I'll pass on it. But I do think we've had several discussions, Jordan and myself, along with Eric Bowder and Lacey Monday, who I know you all have met. We've had a lot of discussions, and I think the Sheriff's Department has even put together kind of a video that they are going to run on the kind of video that plays in the booking area to try to educate folks a little bit about it so that they don't hear it for the first time from me, oftentimes very early in the morning. And so I think that may see an uptick there as more publicity happens. We may see an uptick there, but it's a mixed bag about whether people are enthusiastic to do it or not.
Okay. And opening up for any questions, I'm just kind of asking some stuff. So feel free to ask whatever you want. I will ask, particularly because this has only been going on for, with the new facility for what, 6 months, a little bit more than that, maybe?
It opened the middle of October.
Okay. All right. So, one of the things we noticed was that obviously, particularly people coming in on Fridays, getting out before you have a chance to even review the cases on Monday. Things that have already been looked at about changing to make the program look more effective or be more effective. Anything that you can mention at this point?
I think we have seen this program has a mental health component too. I think an expansion could include some level of substance abuse cases being referred in. Mental health and substance abuse often go hand in hand. And so, sometimes we'll see a possession case where that person may have an underlying issue. And so I think, an expansion of the services to beyond just mental health. The mental health co-op folks are more than capable of kind of crafting plans around both mental health issues and also substance abuse issues. They have a wonderful discharge planner. And so I think an expansion in that direction could potentially see an increase in the types of cases or the number of people. But, ultimately, it's kind of, again, it's a hit and miss thing. We could have 10 people on the eligible list and all 10 of them may want to go different directions. And then the next day have 10 that all want to do it. So it's very difficult to kind of pinpoint that sort of thing.
Okay. Jennifer, you got your hand up. Question for Kyle?
Yeah, do you know what determines the length of stay?
So the coordinator, they have a treatment coordinator there. They meet with the client individually. Like for instance, the gentleman this morning, he'll meet with the treatment coordinator. They will craft a plan that is specific to his needs for stabilization. That could include seeing a doctor. That could include medication. That could include scheduling mental health co-op appointments on the outside to follow up with. It might include finding housing or some sort of residential treatment program. All of those things are on the table. And then they generally update us while we do the staffing each day about, kind of what the person's needs were and how long they anticipate that person might stay. And then once they're finished, then I generate the paperwork that Jordan signs to turn into the court system to have their case dismissed. And then I handle the expungement piece as well.
Do you know about what the average length of stay is right now? Like, is that a way? Like,
that's a common question that's asked by many people when they ask me every day. I would say we have not had anybody finish in less than 5 days, and we've not had anybody take longer than maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks. So I think their program is kind of geared towards a 30-day maximum at most. Because they have a certain curriculum that they use, both with kind of the individual counseling and the group sessions that they do. And so if you hit that 30-day window, you would kind of start back at day one again, which is why they kind of cap it the way that they do. But again, it's all individually based, which doesn't provide the answers that some clients want to hear and some folks in the community want to hear. But it is kind of the way that it is right now.
And I see that Martesha's on, so I'll ask one more question and then stop. But if So if I was in and the treatment coordinator and I had decided that it would be a week and a half, and then I hit like 4 days and I would just like to leave, would I then have to go back and deal with my charges, and that process all starts again, or?
So far, that has not been a common occurrence, which is I
Okay.
think, a testament to some of the good work that the mental health co-op folks are doing in the facility. But the answer is yes. For the few folks that have had that issue, what happens is the staff notifies me. I frequently either meet with them in person or over video conference to kind of talk them through their legal options. And if they decide, you know what, this really wasn't for me, I think I'd rather go through the normal process, then I work with the clerk's office in getting their case placed back on the docket for either a disposition of that, of whatever nature that might require, or facilitating posting of bond or the other kind of regular run-of-the-mill business.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Keeda, you have a question?
Yes. So Kyle, does that work the same if somebody's family decides to make bond while they're, in this process here? So is it still the same?
So I think we've only had maybe one out of the whole 5, almost 6 months now, where she agreed to come in and then her family actually posted her bond. Unbeknownst to her, she was satisfied, I think, with being there as a way to dispose of her case. But at that point, she'd left the facility and she was set for a regular bond docket.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess in that situation, if her case was to actually end up being dismissed and her being able to get expunged, that would be something that you guys would actually have to work out completely different and separately from like her being in the program. It's not something where you could say, oh, well, if she goes and does this maybe in the community, then this is something that is still an option for her.
I mean, I think that is hopefully the likely scenario for that case. That's probably a question better directed to maybe General Hoffman or General Funk with regard to how that case might play out. But certainly I think that's the expectation. But she bonded out very early from when she had agreed to come over. So it's kind of hard to know. That one's still, I think, pending maybe. And so that one, it's hard to know how the outcome will shake down. Okay,
so, all right, great, thanks.
Okay, anything else for Kyle before we turn it over to his boss? We have the public defender on at our meeting. Martesha Johnson is the public defender of Davidson County, Nashville and Davidson County. We're very glad that you're here. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Madam Public Defender. And so I sent to you kind of the basic information about what the committee is doing. Obviously, we've been talking about this process of getting people into the behavioral health center, but most of this committee is really designed to look at the bigger picture and, utilizing the initial question was utilizing the data that we can get from people coming in and out of the jail system in Davidson County. Who are they? Is there something better that we should be doing? That's kind of what we're looking for. And obviously, General Funk is on the call. He was on 2 meetings 2 weeks ago at the last meeting. What can you tell this group as we're looking at this overall picture? What would you say to the whole system, and how would you fix it? And how should we be allocating our resources as well?
Thank you guys for having me and my colleagues on with you tonight. I apologize for my tardiness. I am in Leadership Nashville, and today is Criminal Justice Day. So we were dealing with some heavy stuff around the criminal legal system as a whole. And so I was a little tardy for that. I've watched some of your previous discussions, and it looks like the last few weeks you've centralized the conversations around the Behavioral Care Center. And so that's why I asked Kyle to join me. And then hopefully we can talk about sort of the more global. Obviously, with 60 beds, the BCC is not going to be able to completely address the number of people who enter our system with mental health issues and what we can do in response to that rather than let our jails be the mental health hospital. And so I've asked Emily Herbert to come on and talk with us a little bit about that as well. Generally speaking, I think that it is great to have the conversation and look at the data around who is in custody. I think the biggest conversations that sort of spin out of that for me are the majority of folks that when we've been looking at this a lot during the pandemic to try and see who we could get released from custody, who could not be subjected to the possibilities of it being exposed to COVID in custody. And so we've been talking about who's there and who we can get out. And a number of people who are in our jails right now are there, they're not convicted of anything, and they are awaiting their day in court on charges, largely their felony charges. And so, you know, when you're talking about pretrial and bail reform and cash bail, those issues all come into play because regardless of what the person is charged with, the majority of people who sit there are sitting there without a conviction because they can't secure their release financially. And so that is a conversation. The BCC is on at this point, I think it's a great resource for us, but it is on a granular level of what we can do. We still have people who, because of the nature of their charge, so domestic offenses, you have the mandatory 12-hour hold, you have the nature of what they're charged with that might prevent them from being able to go into the BCC or prevent them from being able to be involved in many of the courts that are designed right now to address diversion. You have, as I said, people who are charged with felony offenses, and you have the position of the district attorney, and I don't want to speak for him, but you know, I guess he had his opportunity 2 weeks ago, so I'll take my opportunity today. You have the position of the DA's office in some of those respects that, you know, pretrial release is not best suited for an individual who is charged with a serious felony or a felony or charges that involve allegations of violence. And so that's why you see some people who are still sitting in custody based on that. I think you also have to, we can't have this conversation without talking about what diversion means. And diversion to me as the public defender means that we're talking about ways to not have people come into the system altogether. And a lot of our courts and a lot of our programs that currently exist are designed to help folks once they actually get here. Once they are booked into our system, you know, how can we prevent them from having a criminal conviction? And that is great. I don't want to at all minimize anything that we can do to prevent people from having convictions. We should. But I do also think that as a city, we should be investing in programs and restorative processes that allow people to avoid coming into this system altogether. And the more offenses, the more categories of cases that we can put into that sort of box, that these are people who have a mental illness, or they have a resource-based need, or they have an adverse child experience that we could address that keeps them out of this system. I think that our resources would be best spent trying to address those things. It requires money. It requires, you know, conversations around where that money is going to come from. It requires, this is literally the same conversation we're having today. It requires, you know, sometimes a conversation that right now is really uncomfortable. People are really uncomfortable hearing the word defund. Just the nature of the word is uncomfortable. It means that you're saying, get rid of the police. It means that you're saying, get rid of all these things. And for me, what I'm saying is, I want you to understand that to appropriately resource the community aspects, the education, the affordability, the mental health, the addiction services, to appropriately resource those things will avoid us having encounters with law enforcement and the criminal legal system altogether. And so I advocate for us to spend more resources in those areas. And I know that that is unpopular, and I know that that is uncomfortable, but as your public defender, you asked me to tell you what I think we should do with our resources. And I think we need to spend resources to keep people from coming to the system altogether.
So let me ask you this before I turn it over to, let's see if Kyle wants to say anything, or and see if I lost somebody. And then Emily's there. So give us examples of diversion programs. So, at some point, obviously, I know Gideon's Army, Violence Interrupters, those types of programs. Other programs that, particularly as the budget comes up for the city, that we should be looking at. I know that the mayor has just talked about this grant program, and I think the council needs to look at it, whether it's funded enough, maybe not. But who, and I know that they're going to go out with the kind of a grant proposal type thing, but from your perspective, what programs are out there that we should be looking at for whether it's new resources or reallocation of resources to things that do work?
I don't think we would be remiss to not spend some time talking about the work of the violence interrupters and what Gideon's Army is trying to do, because what we are seeing with the resources that they have, and they're not city resources, that their influence in the neighborhood where they're working in has been effective. And so what we have to look at is, what are the reasons those things are being affected? It's because they're connected to the community. It's because Hambino and Rashida and her crew, they are invested in being in that community, and not only just existing there as a fixture, but really being a part of the landscape of the community, working through conflict as it arises on a day-to-day basis, interacting with the children there who may be having some issues, helping them navigate their legal processes. I think those things are important, and they don't have the resources to implement that all over the city. Now, I do know that some of the mayors allocated funding, they will have the opportunity to apply for grant funding. I do think that, myself and General Funk have been involved in the restorative courts that are happening down in the juvenile court. And those programs are working. And so if that works, now that's an example of a situation that happens once someone's already here. But I do want to plug that we don't currently have that same program on our adult side. And so having some resources allocated to the same type of programming would be helpful. But to avoid people coming into the system altogether, some of our programs tried to do that. The original conversations around the BCC started as conversations that wouldn't require people to be booked. The original conversations around steering clear that has now eliminated people serving time in custody for driver's license offenses. That conversation originally started with avoiding people being booked altogether. And the pushback there came from law enforcement, because at the time, Chief Anderson was not going to ever be in favor of a process that avoided people being booked on an offense. And fundamentally, so therein is another example of why we have to fundamentally have some conversations that make law enforcement, many people in the community, it makes us sometimes uncomfortable when we say things like trying to avoid people being booked, but we're talking about really offenses that aim to criminalize people's poverty. And so the only way to address that is to do things that we've never done before. So we are going to have to start exploring things that require us not to book, restorative practices that are not held by a judge. And I'll touch just briefly on what I mean by that. Many of our courts that we currently have, so Veterans Court, Mental Health Court, Recovery Court, Drug Court, Cherished Hearts, Care Court, y'all name the courts, they're diversionary in nature, but they are run by a judge. And what that means is the judge is sitting there as a part of this process. And to be quite frank, at times it is a part of someone's punishment to continue in these programs. I think that we should try and pilot initially, or try and look at programs that are community-based, not judge-based, on having people, report there to help them with their budget, or report there to talk about, anger management classes or drug prevention classes in a community space where they already feel comfortable. Because what we do know is once people come into that building, they come into the Birch building, it's really hard to feel comfortable there. It's really hard to feel like the process is designed to help you leave it feeling like you're restored, if I'm being quite honest. Is much work, and I do not want to minimize that a lot of work has been done by our DA's office to try and, work with cases that we could dismiss, talk about things that we can move out of the system, work with us on projects like the BCC and conversations around restorative courts. And all of that is a wonderful undertaking, but we still have to understand that once people are involved in this process, it is very harsh to defendants and victims and families on the other side. But as the public defender, I'm speaking to you about my people. It's harsh to them as they come through this system. Navigating it is tough. And in all programs that have sort of a judge monitoring their growth and development, it can turn into punishment oriented. So I guess I'd summarize all that, Vice Mayor, by saying we have to start as a community getting really comfortable with what are the innovative ways that we can accomplish our goals. Because to do this, we have to be innovative. 10 years ago, we weren't talking about having a BCC or a steering clear or restorative courts in juvenile or adult side. Those weren't things that we were talking about. We had to start being innovative, and we had to start having leaders in place who were willing to do that. And so if you're asking what we should do, that is certainly something that we need to do. We need to have the courage to try something different, because what we've been doing historically for this long hasn't worked for everyone.
All right, so let me ask you, and I've got on the screen, I've got General Funk right above you. So I've got you both together. So it's a good time to ask this, and I'm going to open it up to the committee for questions after this. But the question from a Metro Council standpoint, from a budget standpoint, that is going to be presented to the council at the end of this month, with kind of interesting challenges sitting in front of the city, with a lot of federal money flowing this way. It's one-time funding, but it's money that's coming. The question is there, because I agree with you, I think this is a time where a lot of the things that we've tried in the past haven't necessarily worked. And so what you have to do is be willing to take a chance and work on some programs that seem to be very effective in the community, seem to be working, even though they haven't really been funded to the extent that they should be. So the question to both you, Madam Public Defender, and to the DA is, are there programs that you both kind of agree that, if you sat down with not only the mayor, but with the city council and said, these are programs that we really think should put some money into because these are good. I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't know if you're going to, some people may, I don't know exactly who the mayor put on in terms of determining this grant program. But I'm looking at you two right now to say, hey, if we had money available to spend on innovative programming to help reduce the number of people who come into the system, what are they? Are the things you agreed to, or are you both still separate on stuff?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, Glenn, you and I haven't had that. We haven't put that on our calendar to talk about what are the programs specifically we agreed to. I can tell you that we have recently been in conversations about ways to bring restorative practices to the adult court. We have been in agreement on the functionality of the behavioral care center and even to the point of avoiding booking people altogether. I think we were in agreement on that as to both steering clear and the BCC. Now, I think, we have differences on how we completely accomplish this pretrial system that has some people still in custody because they can't post bail. I think we have some differences on the money bail analysis. But I think we agree that the problem with criminalizing poverty is extreme, and that we can't do it in the traditional justice path. I think I would promote programs that General Funk would probably not go all the way with me on, because I would say take this all the way out of the criminal legal system altogether. Let us replicate a program like what Gideon's Army is starting all across the city, let's give them some funding to see how that works and let them monitor the program, implement the violence interrupters, and let's see what the program can accomplish. I would tell you to take millions of dollars and put it into the priority school districts in Nashville that need those resources to really engage in technology support and really engage in social emotional learning and really bring more opportunities for those children for the summer and for during the school year. And just, I would tell you to let's spend our money in building up our communities, because I just really believe that means we're going to move more people out of the system. I think that's where we probably have some base level disagreements on how to spend the purse. I don't think we would spend the money exactly the same way. But General Funk, I'll pitch it to you and let you speak for yourself.
General Funk?
I tend to agree with Martesha 90 to 95% of the time. And usually we can talk and figure out where our differences are and then agree to professionally leave that up to whoever the decision maker is, whether that's the judge, the mayor, the council, whoever. It took a lot to get driver's licenses to not be booked on driving on a road license. And so what we started doing was having a district attorney right there where the people would show up to get booked and processed, and intercept those folks and say, you know what, go this way instead, and we're going to go ahead and enter a dismissal right now before you're even booked. Because you don't necessarily have to have the fingerprints on file with TBI. You shouldn't have to have a criminal record for the arrest, because the reality is there are data mining companies that as soon as you get booked, if you get booked on a driver's license case at 9 o'clock, we dismiss it at 10 o'clock, it gets expunged at 10:30. There are data mining companies that already know that you have been arrested and can then sell that information. And so what we're trying to do is keep that from happening. So that's what we started doing in September of 2018. And we were successful, but then these data mining companies started contacting the police department, and Chief Anderson said, well, we're not taking them out of our database because we don't have there's no reason for us to do that. Well, it's already been dismissed. Yeah, but we don't have to. And it took us probably a year before finally Mayor Briley was able to impress upon him the need. And even then we had to get the general sessions judges to agree to dismiss based on number of the citation as opposed to the name on the citation, so that we would create as little record as possible. So that's pretty much done with the driver's license, but that was a heavy lift for some reason. I don't know why. With regard to the behavioral care center, I don't want those folks booked either. If we know that we're going to take this mental health issue, that's not really a criminal issue, it's a health issue, and divert that case into the behavioral care center, I don't want them to have an arrest record. And even if they get it expunged as soon as they're getting out, there's still a record that has been created that sometimes some people are going to be able to find, and I don't want them to have to find that. And so one of the things that I've got first on my list with Chief Drake next week, when he and I are getting together, is can we have a deeper discussion to see if maybe when the police officers bring folks down, instead of actually going in front of the commissioner and getting them booked before they make the decision, yeah, I'd rather have my case diverted, can we hold off on the booking until after that decision's been made? Because if they go to the behavioral care center, they should not have even a record of an arrest. That I know will be expunged at some point, but some people can find. Martesha and I have already been working a little bit with Gideon's Army about can we do some restorative justice in the adult system. And there are only a few places that are doing restorative justice even in juvenile systems, and I don't know of any that are doing it in the adult system, but I'm sure there's probably some somewhere that we can look at. But we're talking about starting a program that would be modeled on what we're doing in juvenile court, which still has 0% recidivism after coming up on 3 years and 100% victim satisfaction. But we're talking about starting with just a couple of cases a month as a pilot program. But the problem is, even if we do that, that's post-arrest. And I share Martesha's frustration with the fact that if there is a way that we can come up with to keep people from being arrested if they're going to enter into these diversion programs, that's really the win-win, and that should be the goal for all of us. How would we do that? It's tough because Tennessee is an officer charged state. We're in the minority of states. Most states, the officer might make an arrest, but then the district attorney has sometimes 2 days if the person's in custody, sometimes a week if they've gone ahead and made bail. But the person's not actually booked on a specific charge until the DA says, yeah, we're going to charge and we're going to charge this. And so the way that Tennessee does it, the officer comes, the officer decides what charge, the magistrate determines that there's probable cause just based on the officer's testimony, and in a very, very quick perfunctory hearing, and then they're booked and processed, and then we can divert folks. I would love to be able to find some process, even in an officer charged state, where we might be able to divert folks into either a restorative justice program, into some other type of community-based organization where appropriate supports can be given to where hopefully the person is better equipped to not violate whatever the law is that they're alleged to have violated, but don't have to suffer what can be sometimes very extreme collateral consequences. It can cost you a job, it can cost you housing. There's all kinds of problems that go along with just being charged. And so I'd love to do that. And of course, we would have to be a part of that process, because not every case that Martesha thinks ought to be diverted or something that the district attorney's office might think ought to be diverted. And so we have to be a part of that. And certainly I think public defenders could have a voice in that decision, though ultimately it would be the prosecutor's job, constitutional. Our responsibility is to determine which cases to go forward on and which cases to dismiss, which cases to ask for what sanction on, which cases to invest the resources for a jury trial. I mean, that's kind of, that's our job description.
Well, General, let me stop you for a second, because I've got some questions. People have got some questions. I guess what I would ask both you and the public defender, and then I'm going to go to the questions. I think what we're looking for are possibilities at this point. It sounds like you all may disagree on some things, but the idea is we want less crime, we want less people coming into the system. And I would agree with the public defender in the sense that we need to be innovative. And I think we all, and you're shaking your head, we need to be innovative. It's an opportune time to have you both on the screen at the same time, because the budget is coming. And I think it's a good time to let us know, both the mayor and the council, what you think are out there that we should take a serious look at.
I would love to see Gideon's Army get funded so that they've got the funding to do a restorative justice program in criminal court. We've been talking about, because we're trying to keep the expenses low for them, only doing a couple of cases a month, you know, while we're in the pilot phase. But if they actually had funding, we could probably send 10 cases a month or more. And then we would be tracking the success rate for those folks. We'd be talking the recidivism rate, and we'd be tracking victim satisfaction, to where at the end of a year, we'd be able to come back and say, yeah, these folks came through, this is what the results were, and we can expand it if we've been successful, and if we're not being successful, then we can adapt the program. But if you want a specific ask, I'll give you the specific ask, and that is, let's get some money to Gideon's Army to where they can handle a restorative justice program in adult court.
All right, let me
agree. They're not the only.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, I totally agree with that. They are not the only community-based program that could assist people with resource needs in their communities, though. And so I think that while Gideon's Army is definitely one that should be funded, I don't think you should eliminate talking to the other ones that are out there doing the work. These are the programs that, you know, could benefit from that. I mean, I think you have a representative from Free Hearts on your community, on your committee here. And so that's certainly a conversation that you should have as well. And I just think that as you have invited us to speak with you about these, I think inviting these community groups into the space to talk to you about their programs and their success rates and their connections to the community is equally important.
And a very good point. And I probably will get back to both of you to figure out how we do that, because by the time we look up, the budget will have passed. It'll be the end of June, and then I don't want to miss on this opportunity. Let me go to Anna Albescu has had her hand up, and no, Keeda has had her hand up. We're trying to get these questions in. Anna, you're recognized.
Hi, I apologize. I've been eating. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. And we can hear you eating. That's fine. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So my question is directed to Ms. Martesha Johnson and also Mr. Glenn Funk. Since you all have been, so especially Ms. Johnson, you've been speaking a lot on restorative justice. And so I would just like to know how you view law enforcement's role, specifically MNPD and the Sheriff's Department in restorative justice. Like, what does that look like, as we progress into Nashville's future?
To me, it looks like an understanding from law enforcement and the Sheriff's Department, which I do think, thankfully, Sheriff Hall understands. It requires them to understand that as law enforcement, they don't have all the answers. They don't have what we traditionally, we have law enforced ourselves into this problem. And so we have to have an understanding that we can't law enforce ourselves out of the problem. And so I don't see, law enforcement has been created for a purpose. In a true visionary restorative justice program that diverts people, doesn't book people, and helps them stay entrenched and restored in their communities, I think the role for law enforcement there is very minor. It requires the resources be allocated to the community themselves. And when I say Sheriff Hall is on board with that, I don't want to give anybody on the call an impression that I'm speaking for him either. I just know that he has an understanding and has even began saying that if you take some money from his budget to give to mental health agencies to do this work on a larger scale, then we'll have better results there. What he's saying is his goal is to decriminalize the mentally ill regardless. And he doesn't have to be the dictator of the purse around how to do that. And I think that's where how law enforcement ought to see their role.
Okay. Okay. Keeda, you're next.
I was just going to say exactly what Martesha said at the end there, is that there are definitely other organizations in the community that are doing work to divert people from coming into the criminal justice system, and then organizations that are doing the work on the opposite end of that, where she talked about the issue with cash bail and money bail and stuff like that. So if we're talking about really reimagining justice, because that's what we're talking about here, and we're talking about bringing in organizations from the community, I think we need to have conversations with community members and those that are in the community that are doing the work on an everyday basis. And as she mentioned, I am the senior legal advisor at Free Hearts. We just paid a bond for somebody to get out of jail that's been in pretrial custody for 5 years now. So these issues that Martesha are talking about, these are very real issues that I don't think a lot of people really think that they are, but they really are. And we have programs that we set up at Free Hearts in order to help people get out of custody, because that's really what we're dealing with most of the time. And so we develop different plans that we present to the judges at bond hearings and have even testified at sentencing hearings and various different things in that nature. And so if you would like for Dawn Harrington to come in to speak more in detail about what it is we do and how Free Hearts could be involved in reimagining justice here in the community, we can easily get her on. And there are so many other organizations that are also doing the work that's providing the necessary resources for people that need them. And so if we need to compile a list of that, I am more than happy to do that, seeing that a lot of these organizations are, coalition partners of ours that we work with in the community, because we in the community are already trying to reimagine justice for those that are impacted by this criminal legal system.
Okay, so Keeda, let me ask you a quick question, and then I'm going to Jennifer and Hallie. I like the idea. There's a lot of groups out there. I don't want to interfere or mess up the process of applying for the grants through the mayor's new program, because that hasn't been laid out yet. So I don't want to mess anybody's opportunity to do that. But I do think it's important for people in the community, people who are watching this, people on the council, to understand the different groups that are out there. We obviously have heard a lot about your group. We've heard a lot about Gideon's Army, but we don't know necessarily all the different groups that are out there. And I think it might be important to hear from them. The question is, how do you do that in a time frame of an hour or 2 hours and let everybody, because if you don't exclude somebody, then people get mad. So you want to have a chance to have people kind of come in and say what they want to say and listen to them.
Well, the fortunate thing is that, with Dawn Harrington, who's the executive director of Free Hearts, is that she has been doing this work in Nashville in the community for quite a while, and pretty much knows everyone that's doing the work and who's doing the work, and probably has worked with them in some capacity or another. And so, I could definitely, get with Dawn and we could try to compile a list. There are other people that I know that have been working on various different issues in the community. You have Jackie Sims that has been working on a lot of things. You have Sekou Franklin that's been working on a lot of things. So there are a lot of people. You've got Raheem Buford that has been working on, a lot of different things in the community when it comes to criminal justice reform. You've got the people at, NOAA that are a part of different organizations that have been working on things. And so, the groups are out there. And like I said, if we need to compile a list, Anna and I will sit down one day and, hash it out. And I'm volunteering you here. So, we can, sit down and come up with it and even reach out to the various different people in these organizations if we can figure out a time that we would want them to speak to us here at this committee, or to speak to the actual council about who they are and what they do, so that the city is aware of all of the people that's doing the necessary work around reimagining justice in the community already. And so that way that the city can plug into them, as well as the public defender's office and the DA's office and anybody else that needs to plug into these organizations as well.
Okay. So Keeda, I'm going to take you up on your offer. We're going to try to figure out how to do this and how to do it properly so the right people are listening. And we need to do it, I would say, relatively soon before the budget discussions. Can't promise anything with the budget, but I think it would be interesting to let people hear. Okay. Hallie, did you have a question? You took your hand down, but no, now you're shaking no. Jennifer, you had your hand up before. Question?
Yeah, and I took it down because I feel like I always ask questions and wanted to leave room for somebody else.
We want you to ask questions. That's fine.
So going back to some of the conversation about preventing people from even coming into the criminal justice system, like even being arrested or being involved with law enforcement, are there any like risk or harm reduction programs that you've had experience with, either in this city that we might have started and tried and not funded enough, or in another city that you know of or had involvement with, that you think would be beneficial for us to look into? Or if we have a program like that is not funded not funded well enough to be effective, that we could maybe put some more money at?
That's a question to the public defender?
Either of them. Just thinking like the movement to decriminalize, marijuana, and some states and some cities have needle exchange programs, and, Planned Parenthood, hands out condoms so people don't get STDs, like those kind of risk reduction, harm reduction programs. Okay.
I'll go to either the public defender or the DA.
I know that the mayor's office is currently looking at programming across the country that does some of that. One of the programs they're looking at is in Oakland. And, I have not personally been involved with any of those programs. I think that Nashville is a nuanced place. We're a little different because this mind shift that we're talking about, we're just sort of getting into that space of doing the mind shift work. And so I think that that's the complicator that we have had. And so, no, I don't have any experience with other programs that we have tried to implement here and it didn't work. There are programs that we're currently implementing, and we've talked about those: juvenile restorative court. We've proposed Gideon's Army stuff, but otherwise I don't have any examples to give you. And I think Kyle dropped something about Narcan in the chat.
Yeah. General Funk.
I'm a member of the American Prosecutors Association, which is all big city prosecutors. Nashville's kind of on the low end of that as far as our total population. And we get together twice a year. In fact, Nashville's going to host. I'm going to host at the end of July. And it's you know, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Louisville, a lot of places from around the country, Miami, Jacksonville, Dallas, Austin. Yeah, I'm not going to list all the folks that come. It's about 30 to 35 folks normally come. And then we also get on a Zoom conference once a month. And so what we do is we primarily share best practices. And, you know, we're going to be talking about the behavioral care center. That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about when we're hosting. We get to talk about 2 or 3 programs. We'll talk about our domestic violence early intervention meetings. We'll talk about the behavioral care center, 2 of our primary points that we're going to be sharing with other folks from around the country. I have not heard anybody talk about, and these are folks that are very progressive. Now, we're all prosecutors, right? But the electorates from these jurisdictions are gonna elect folks that are like me, that are open to innovation. Sometimes they're even more innovative, or maybe even more progressive than I am. But we're all open to these types of discussions. And so but nobody has yet brought up this type of, what if we keep folks from being even brought to booking? But that is something that I'm going to make sure is on the agenda for the meeting here, but also on the agenda for some of the discussions over the next couple months. And I'd love to be able to bring back any best practices that we can glean from any of these jurisdictions to open it up to this group and to the council as far as, is this something we would like to try in a pilot here in Nashville? Because if it's working in Portland and we can demonstrate that it works in Nashville, maybe we'll get the kind of traction that we need for Nashville to fully embrace it. You know, this is sometimes tough to get. Look, when I started just not putting people in jail for driver's license, Channel 4 ran a 2-minute piece as if that was the worst thing in the world. Though, what happens if somebody that doesn't go to jail for driver's license goes out and runs somebody over? There is a little bit of inertia as far as, let's keep doing things the way that we've always done them. And there's always somebody that can say, well, that's a terrible idea because what if? Which is why we've been doing some things in a pilot to be able to demonstrate it. But we've got to find and identify those. And I've got a resource. I've got this American Prosecutors Association, the APA, and hopefully we're going to be able to find more best practices, and I'll bring them back to this group.
Okay. Well, so it is 6 o'clock. We have a hard stop at 6. I know I still got people in the queue, but we have to stop for tonight.
Please invite us back.
I think I'm going to invite you both back because I've got people, well, from 2 standpoints. Still, I've got people who want to ask questions, and then I think we want to continue this conversation. Okay. So Public Defender Johnson, thank you for coming on. DA Funk, thanks for coming on. You all, thanks for coming on. I would encourage you to invite other people to join and listen. This is a very good conversation that's taking place at a very good time. Okay. Everybody be safe. Remember, the pandemic is not over. Everybody be careful. Keeda, I'll be in touch with you. I think you put out your email address. That's great. So we're going to work on that. We got some work to do on this committee before end of April. So thank you all. Enjoy the weekend. Thanks for being on the call. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all so much.